Hello everybody, welcome back to Rachel Reads. My name is Rachel. I love to read and write Christian fiction, and today I'm doing Recent Reads number 1 of 2025. The very first book I read in 2025 was Carols and Spies by Jennifer Kropp. This is a novella collection and it is a prequel to the Winter Soul series. I gave this book 5 stars. I loved the short stories and how they all connected. I thought they were written really well, and I appreciate this book so much, and I really did like reading it after I read the series, but I think you could read it in whatever order you prefer. But I did love this book. To preface this whole video, I'm not going to go over any major content in books, but the content notes are on my Goodreads, so if you want to know content-specific details, go check out my Goodreads. The next book I read was Spectres in the Glass House by Jamie Jo Wright, and I gave this book 2 stars. This book is a dual timeline novel, and it kind of rides the line of thriller and horror. It is Christian, but there were just a lot of things that I didn't like, and I didn't like how certain topics were handled per se. Like I mentioned, you can go check out my full review on Goodreads, but other than that, I just wasn't a huge fan of this book. Some others of Jamie Jo Wright's books I really have enjoyed. This one just wasn't for me. The next book to talk about is Tea with Elephants by Robin Jones Gunn, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. This is a story of 2 best friends who reconnect on a safari trip in Africa, and I really did enjoy this novel. It wasn't per se a favorite because I feel like it's maybe written for different stages of life. They're both married, but they take some time to do a safari that they had wanted to do for years, and I did enjoy a lot of the story. I love the faith content, and I love how certain things were discussed. The next book I read is The Lightkeeper's Daughter by Colleen Coble. This is a historical romance set in 1907, and this is about a girl who finds out that she is not the daughter of the parent she's been with for years, so she goes to the place where her father lived to try to uncover the mystery of her mother and why she was separated from her father for so long. And it was really interesting. I enjoyed the mystery aspects of it. The romance was fine. Nothing about this book was outstanding per se. I did enjoy some of the mystery and some of the action, but I didn't enjoy all of the parts in between. It got a little bit boring. So not a favorite, but definitely a good book and an interesting one to check out. The next book I read was Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott O'Dell. I gave this book 3 stars. This is a retelling of a girl who is lost on an island by herself for years, and she is a native Indian to the island, but she is left behind essentially. And while the story was interesting and based on a true story, I didn't like how the author wrote it. I found it boring and dry. Definitely not a favorite, and it's good maybe for a younger audience, but not a favorite. The next book I read is Between the Sound and the Sea by Amanda Cox. I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed this one. This is about a girl who goes to work on this lighthouse hired by an old man and his grandson. I enjoyed the romance. I enjoyed the mystery. I liked some of the historical aspects that were thrown in there. I loved uncovering and seeing how people reconnected. This was really a sweet story, and I would recommend checking out Amanda Cox. She writes more literary style, but she does have themes of other genres weaved into her book. The next book I read was Conspiracy of Silence by Ronnie Kindig. This is actually my first Ronnie Kindig book. I'm really excited to finally have read one of her books. This is a suspense book, very governmental suspense and international. It's really interesting. This is about Cole Cox Russell, and he has essentially been dead for years, but he comes back because certain threats that have been made, and they're on this quest for a cure for a plague that has broke out. Plague is actually steeped heavily in biblical themes, which you do see weaved throughout the story, and I found that really interesting to read about. Some of this was just confusing, and some of the drama in between characters was just frustrating, but other than that, I did really enjoy it. The next book I read was Full Steam Ahead by Karen Winnemeyer. I gave this 4.25 stars. This is about Nicole Reynard. She's the daughter of a shipping tycoon, essentially, and she has to protect the family dagger with an inheritance because other people are trying to get this dagger. So she runs away. So she goes off to get married, and I think she meant to run to New Orleans, but she gets stopped and ends up in a different part of Texas where she meets Darius Thornton, and I love this book so much. I have thought about this book time and time again. It made me really happy. There were some fun, just banter and funny moments. I loved our two characters and how they interacted. There was some like faith content, a little bit of suspense in the historical style, but again, like I mentioned, I loved this book. It had some really heavy historical elements with steamships, so if you're interested in that, please check this book out. The next book I have to talk about is actually a reread, but that is Once I Knew by Victoria Lynn. Once again, I gave this book 4.75 stars. I absolutely love this book. It is one of my favorite books of all time. This is the quintessential cottagecore fantasy book. It is not magical fantasy, and it is excellent. There are kingsmen and knights and a girl. It's an excellent book. The romance is one of my favorites. This has the amnesia and hidden identity trope, so if you like those, I would check this out. The next book I read was highly recommended by some of my friends, and that is Made to Match by Deanne Gist. This is about Tilly, who works at the Biltmore as a maid, and Mac Danvers, who is hired as a useful man, I believe is what he called. He essentially does odd jobs around the Biltmore estate, and I really love this book. It dealt with some heavier themes, and it got really dark at the end for a moment. It did get better, that dark moment was really hard. I gave this book 4.25 stars. The romance was just really sweet, and I liked seeing how they developed. If you want content details on some of the darker themes or the romance, again, check out my Goodreads. But I did love this book. I love the setting. It was so interesting to learn about the mountain life and the Biltmore. Check it out. The next book I really want to talk about is Promise by Leah Garriott. I gave this book 4.75 stars, and oh my goodness, this has potential to be one of my favorite books of the year. So this is all about Margaret Britton, who has been hurt by love in the past. So she goes to this social gathering and decides, whatever man I find agreeable, I'm going to marry him, no matter what it takes. She goes, finds this man called Mr. Northam, and decides he's the one. Well, he has a bad reputation, but she doesn't care. She's over it. So when she returns home, she finds out her father has already betrothed her to someone else. Lord Williams, the cousin of Mr. Northam. And oh my goodness, I love this book so much. This is essentially Pride and Prejudice meets Beauty and the Beast minus the Stockholm Syndrome. I love this book so much. The romance was so sweet. I love the banter. I love the plot line. This was just a really strong book. This is the only book the author has out, and I'm so shocked because this was just excellent. I want to read more books like this, and I currently am, but I really want to read more books by this author. I love this one so much, and I have not heard anyone talk about it, so I feel like, I have to do it right. The next book I read was A Curse of Golden Beauty by Mary Meekum. I gave this book 4.25 stars, and this is actually accessible through the author's newsletter, so if you haven't signed up, I would recommend it. This was an excellent book. It is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. This deals with a lot of great topics. So the main character has arthritis essentially. So if you want to see that represented in a book, this is an excellent way to do so. But this is about Meg, and she has essentially been cursed with beauty, but she has to obey whatever her father says. But I really love this book. It was really sweet. A very short read, but a very good read. The next book I read was The Door Within by Wayne Thomas Batson. I gave this 4.5 stars, and this is about a boy named Eden who gets transported to a fantasy world where there are dragons and sword fighting and an allegory, and I really did love this book. I think it's really good for maybe boys ages 9 to 13, but like I said, it was really good. I enjoyed some of the themes weaved throughout the story. The allegory was really strong and well done. This is definitely more like an epic or high fantasy. So if you enjoy Narnia, I think this would be a great one to read next. It's not like Narnia, but again, it's a great book. And I definitely want to continue on with the series. The next book I read was For a Lifetime by Gabriel Meyer. I give this book 4.5 stars, and I'm so excited to finally have read book 3. It took forever for my library to get it in, and they only had it in large print, but I was determined to read it. And I binged this book so quickly. This deals with two twins. They each live in two timelines. One is in the 1910s, and the other is during the Salem witch trials, which, if you know anything about that, not great. But I actually learned a lot about that timeline through this book and found it really interesting. So I did love learning both timelines, both characters. The love interests were really great, and I'm so excited to finally have read book 3 in The Timeless, and I cannot wait to continue. The next book I have to talk about is I Think I Was Murdered by Colleen Coble and Rick Acker, and I gave this book 3.75 stars. This is a romantic suspense book. This book is highly controversial on just the Christian fiction realm for multiple reasons. It does deal with AI, and I actually found it really interesting, especially combined with a suspense story. I know others might not like that as much, but I really loved it. This does deal a lot with modern technology and Bitcoins, AI, that sort of thing. One aspect I really loved that I found interesting was our main characters are essentially rich. They have Teslas, they own $1 million businesses. I really love that aspect because I feel like we don't see it a lot. This deals with our main character who has essentially been communicating with her dead husband through AI, which sounds really weird, but it isn't as weird when you start reading it and when she starts realizing what's actually going on behind the scenes. I liked how the plot developed. It's not for everyone, and it wasn't a favorite, but it was overall a good book. The last book I have to talk about is Lakeshire Park by Megan Walker. This is a book from the library, but this is all about Amelia Moore, who just needs to secure the future happiness of her sister Clara, and the only way to do that is by going to this house party hosted by a man named Sir Ronald, but a different man, Mr. Peter Wood, has the same interest for his sister. So I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.25 stars. The one thing that knocked it down that I feel like I need to note is there was a scene where there was a fake palm reading. It wasn't real, but I didn't like seeing that in a book. Aside from that, I did love this book. The romance was sweet. The banter was amazing. I love the plot line. I love some of the themes and threads pulled throughout the book. The ending had me really shocked for a moment, but then everything resolved itself really sweetly. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope God blesses you today. I do my best to post Fridays at 5, and I'll see you next time. Bye!